Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Talent Gap Fireside Chat, where we talk about causes of and solutions to the talent gap. I'm your host, Pete Strauss, and joining me today is Phillip Wiley. Phillip is a security solutions specialist for CYE, I believe, and runs his own podcast called The Phillip Wiley Show. Welcome, Phillip.
Thank you. It's an honor and pleasure to be joining you today. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. Well, appreciate you being on as well, Phillip. Could you give our audience a little background on yourself and how you came to be where you are today, professionally speaking?
Sure. Yeah, my background, I got started in IT as a system administrator back in 97, did that for about 6 years. Moved into security in January 2004. I was doing network security, did that for about a year and a half. We did network security, firewalls, intrusion detection systems. We did some vulnerability scans and some risk assessments. The company hired a new CISO, and he had a more modern view of the way security organizations should be run. And he separated us into different groups because at the time there were 5 of us. We were all doing the exact same thing. He started an AppSec group, and I got put on the AppSec group and did that for a little over 6 or maybe about 7 years. And I got laid off from my job. And I'd been wanting to get into pen testing because as part of the role in AppSec, I was managing the third-party pen test that was conducted by consultants, as well as doing some vulnerability scans. And I got interested in penetration testing. So when I got laid off in 2012, I applied for a consulting role as a pen tester for Verizon. And so I've been in pen testing, the offensive security side, a little over 11 years. I've also done some education. I used to teach at Dallas College. I taught pen testing and web app pen testing for almost 4 years. I still continue to teach workshops at conferences and for other organizations. And so actually I kind of got more into the vendor side of things last year. So part of my role where I'm at is I'm an evangelist. So I go out and speak on the topic of offensive security, kind of do some SE type activities for my company, as well as also some marketing stuff that leveraging my experience as a podcaster and webinar host. I do a lot of that type of stuff for them. So it's been an interesting change because I really liked to speak, teach, and mentor people. So it's kind of been a good shift for me because a lot of people that are pen testers, either they end up going to management, totally get out of the offensive security side. But for me, this was kind of a more interesting way to do that because I enjoy content creation and I can leverage those skills in my current role at SCI.
Very cool. So I believe you've been involved too with kind of helping people break into the security industry as well, especially in offensive security.
Yes, and I actually have a book on the subject, the Pen Tester Blueprint, which is based on the lecture that I gave at Dallas College when I was teaching there. The very first year I taught there, I was giving this lecture each semester. And some of the other cybersecurity instructors would invite me to come over and talk to their class about pen testing. And I gave that talk. By November of 2018, it became a conference talk I gave for the first time at our local B-Sides conference, the B-Sides DFW conference. And then I started giving the talk at numerous conferences after that. And I was in the Tribe of Hackers Red Team book published by Wiley. And I shared about being in the book, and one of my contacts there had reached out to me and asked me if I had any books that I'd like to write. So I had the idea of taking that Pen Tester Blueprint lecture and talk and turning it into a book. And so that's one of my passions is mentoring and teaching others, helping them get started in offensive security.
Very cool. Yeah. And you're the first guest that I've had on the podcast that's specifically devoted to offensive security. When I talk about the talent gap, often tends to be kind of amorphous, or it's talking about an industry-wide, talent gap. Would you say that there is any sort of talent gap in the offensive security space specifically?
Well, I think there's a shortage of people that are working, but I think there's a good talent pool to pull from. I think some cases, hiring managers need to be a little more creative with their hiring, give people opportunities that maybe they've done, maybe they've done things like hack the box, bug bounty, and that sort of thing. And maybe create technical challenges that they give to people when they're interviewing them. So really you don't have to waste a lot of time if the person doesn't have the technical skills to do the job, if you give them like a CTF type scenario, a vulnerable environment to perform a pen test against, you can see whether they got the skills there, and then you can, kind of eliminate all the sometimes, interviews are anywhere from 3 to 6 interviews. The interview process has gotten pretty crazy over the years. But the thing is, if you're able to see if they have the skill set, then they can proceed from there. If they don't, then you're not spending a lot of time setting up interviews. In a lot of cases, doing it that way, you got all these different technical interviews. One or two of those are going to be technical, but you spend a lot of time with each candidate. If you could do something up front, like showing, giving this challenge for them to perform to see if they have the skills. A lot of times it's just seeing the potential. They write a pen test report. They kind of discuss how they did things. You kind of get an idea of their mindset. One organization that comes to mind is Praetorian out of Austin. They've got a challenge on their website. You go to their website, and there's several different hacking challenges on there, or cybersecurity challenges that you go through, and you solve those. You turn in the results to an email address or a form that you upload, and then they kind of see already. They know that where your technical skills lie, and that saves a lot of time. And some other organizations I've seen, like Synac, Red Team, use like Hack the Box certain challenges or certain certifications. You have this certification, then it puts you on higher on the priority to interview. So a lot of times, if you can test those technical skills right off, then you're not tying up your people's time doing interviews for someone that don't quite have the technical skills.
Yeah, and I would imagine too, with a practical exercise like that, you'd be able to identify somebody who has a lot of promise, but isn't necessarily the best fit on paper. One thing that I've really rallied against over the years is hiring people strictly based on years of experience. I think oftentimes that's kind of the default, because people struggle with being able to rate people's experience in certain areas or test their knowledge. So it's just people default to, how long have you done this? We're going to put it on the job description. All right, senior pen tester, you have to have been doing it for 5 years. But I can tell you as a recruiter, I was a stronger recruiter at a year and a half into my career than a lot of people were after 5 or 10. And I think basically any discipline, if somebody's smart enough and they have enough critical thinking ability, they can really punch way above their weight sometimes. So, you bring up a good point about kind of being efficient in the interview process. Sometimes when I see an interview process get too bloated, often it's too many steps, or in some cases, if you're trying to hire somebody who's super in demand, like a senior pen tester, putting that practical exercise too early in the process can also be an issue. If you have somebody that has multiple offers on the table and they have a lot of different options, they may not want to jump through that hoop too early on before they've gotten a chance to know the company a little bit and understand that it's going to be a good fit for them. But at the same time, you could also save a lot of time by having them do that challenge and maybe cut out a couple rounds of interviews. So totally agree with you there. There's a balance between brevity and also making sure that you're really vetting the skills of somebody, and if you can do that more efficiently versus having a ton of rounds, that's going to work in your favor. So you'd mentioned shortage. So would you say that there's a shortage of good, strong senior pen testers out there, or could you define what you view the talent gap as being in the offensive security space?
Yeah, I really think it's more of a matter of some of the job descriptions. People don't think that they're looking for a unicorn, and when really honestly all they need is this. A lot of cases people are trying to get someone that can do all these things, and if you're hiring for a web app pen testing role, you're really not needing someone that can pen test Active Directory. So I think getting the right job description more accurate, more realistic. I've seen some cases where some companies have just copied and pasted some other company's job description, and I've seen some cases where they forgot to change the company name. And so the job description is very important. When I used to be a red team lead at a global consumer products company, I was looking for a teammate in India because we had an office in India that they were trying to build out. That way we kind of had coverage from 24 hours, 24/7, around the globe. So that way people in one area is not having to put in crazy hours. And so we're looking for this person. We just weren't all the resumes were for web app pen testers or people with bug bounty experience. While that's good, if you're going to do true red teaming is adversary emulation. So it's really heavy on more of the infrastructure hacking and Active Directory and social engineering. If someone has the infrastructure network pen testing background, they can be taught to do red teaming. But if it's someone that's specialized in web app pen testing, it's going to be a little more of a learning curve. So we're having a hard time finding candidates. So I went back and looked at the job description, and sure enough, the job description was more geared towards a web app pen testing role or just a generalist performing all different types of pen tests. And once we changed that, we started getting the right candidates. So it's making sure that your job description's accurate. Don't ask for too much, because sometimes you scare people off. I see so many people that are new to the industry are wanting to move from some other areas, security or IT, into pen testing, and they get intimidated. They see these job descriptions. I tell them, apply for it anyway, because, really at the end of the day, you don't know who's going to submit their resumes. You may have some kind of background, maybe you worked in finance. It's more important to them, and those things that stand out. So sometimes as an employee, you have to make sure that you just apply for those. As far as an employer, you need to really make sure that you're creating accurate job descriptions is something that's going to help you fill that role, and not just a laundry list of skills. Take time to build out a good job description, and it's going to make it easier.
Yeah, and I would advise people, like you said, don't copy paste job descriptions. I know sometimes it can feel like a lot to manually assemble a job description from scratch. I would say in some cases you can use a template of a job description from somewhere online, but you want to fill that out with the information that's relevant to your team. Like, really think about what they're going to be doing day to day. Think about why your company is great and put it in your own words. So many job descriptions out there are just they're formulaic. One, two, they sound like ChatGPT wrote them. I guess you could go down that road at some point, but they're just not written in a human's voice. And I think being written in a human's voice can give people a glimpse into your culture and what it's actually like to work for you. Versus trying so hard to sound professional. I mean, at the end of the day, you are trying to attract somebody to your organization. It can also go too far the other way. I've seen some that are exclamation points every sentence, and we're looking for rock stars, and we do pizza parties and stuff like that. I think the best ones are probably somewhere there in the middle. Do you I guess going to sort of the entry level point, it seems like pen testing and offensive security, it's maybe the sexiest subdiscipline of security. And we have a ton of people trying to break into the industry, and specifically into pen testing. I think we have an issue where there's probably not enough entry level jobs, especially for offensive security, since that's the area where most people want to get into those roles. Would you have, I guess, any advice to hiring managers out there that maybe they have a senior level role that they need to fill on their team for senior pen tester? Is there any case that you could make to figure out a way for them to be able to hire somebody more junior and give somebody a shot?
Yeah, I think some of the ways you can do this, and one of the ways to look at a way that you can utilize more junior level people, is one of the things you can do is they don't have to jump in doing the full pen test. You can bring in someone junior level that they're doing like the vulnerability scans, maybe some of the port and service scans, going through and validating some of those vulnerabilities if they're truly findings and not false positives. So this is a lot of stuff that the more senior pen testers get bored with. So have them doing that type of stuff, maybe doing more of a vulnerability assessment, to where they start out doing the scans, validating vulnerabilities, because the difference between a pen test and a vulnerability assessment is, with the pen test, items that you find that are vulnerable or exploitable, you try to exploit those and see if you can do any post-exploitation activities. With the vulnerability assessment, you're not getting into the hacking piece. And that's one of the areas where more of the damage comes from. If you're not careful what you're doing, trying to exploit a system, you can cause more problems. So just kind of let them start out with some of the lower level tasks, making it easier for the seniors, because if you've got one or two resources that are running on these vulnerability scans, they could be saving time. They pass off the information they've collected. The senior pen tester goes in and they're dealing more with the exploitation and post exploitation activities, and kind of get them into where they're doing some of the exploitation stuff, but let them start out doing more easy tasks, because run a vulnerability scan is not that difficult. And then while maybe the scan's going on, if there's nothing for them to do at the moment, have them shadowing some of the seniors and seeing how they're doing things. And I think if you do your environment, your team where it's really well organized, create like a wiki or different how-tos on how to validate different types of vulnerabilities, because that's one of the things when pen testers start out is you have to do all this research on how to validate different types of vulnerabilities. And part of this is not all companies really adequately document that. I've worked in a lot of organizations where we didn't have any kind of wiki or anything on SharePoint on how to do these things. Everyone was figuring it out on their own. If you share that information as you go along, this is the way I validate it. Not to say it's the only way to doing it, but sharing that information is going to make it easier for new people coming in. You've got this documentation on how to do these type of activities, how to exploit things, how to validate vulnerabilities. Then it makes their life easier. They're able to get up to speed quicker. It's going to require less of the seniors' time. There does need to be some mentoring and shadowing going on, but there's some cases if you have the document out there, you're not having to spend all that time with the junior. They're able to go out, look at the documentation, be more self-sufficient that way. So those are some of the things that I'd recommend.
Very cool. Yeah. So it sounds like you would spend maybe a little bit more time on the front end, documenting processes and techniques and stuff like that. But once you have that repository, then it's a lot easier and saves you time in the long run. You're not having to handhold quite as much. I always say to kind of do that on the hiring and recruiting side as well. If you can document how you attract talent, how you onboard talent, everything should be at least somewhat regimented, so you have a concrete and repeatable process down, to where it just generates efficiencies. So you're not trying to reinvent the wheel every time you do something. And I hear often about how security teams are overworked. I think a lot of that happens because there's not one, enough organization, and two, enough documentation on how things are done, and people end up guessing, and they have to do more research than maybe they needed to do, and stuff like that. So yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, I've been in organizations where actually one I returned to, and when I came back, I need all the links of the resources, and someone had to manually email that out to me. So anytime you have to repeat something, you're going to repeat it for sure. You need to have it documented, because, for instance, the organization we were using Teams, so you can set up like wikis and SharePoints and Teams. And so when I just need to ask, I've been there before, so I need to ask for these URLs. I had to go ask for them, and someone had to go collect these things. If someone would have just taken a document, put that on the Teams for the pen test team, put that document in there, someone could access it. All you got to do is point people to the SharePoint. It makes that stuff a lot easier. And I see a lot of people that are helping folks that are aspiring pen testers or security professionals looking for different types of content. You tell people numerous times, this is how you do it, this is how you get started. But the smart ones will go out there and document this, so that when someone comes up, they can just copy and paste the information from the document, or share that document with the people requesting the information.
Yep. And that's what I kind of hope to do with these podcasts. Is it'll be a repository of information for people that are looking to hire people, and best practices. And it's something that I can point people to a specific episode and say, we actually just talked about that. I think often that actually happens these days on Discord channels too. You'll see pinned information to newcomers and stuff like that. So I see a lot of folks going towards these Discord channels, and that's another point I would mention for anybody looking to hire somebody junior, or considering it. Just interact on some of these offensive security Discord channels with some of the community, and you'll see there's a ton of people out there that show a lot of promise and are passionate about the field and stuff like that. But you have to get out there and actually spend the time to interact with folks. So I guess, could you give our audience some success stories that you've had as far as mentoring people, or hiring at more junior levels, stuff like that?
Sure. One of the things I would say, and one of the things that helped me get my foot in the door at first was, I'd worked in security for several years when I moved into the pen testing role. But when I moved into that pen testing role, the experience I had was sysadmin experience, network security, application security. I'd done some vulnerability scans and managed some pen tests, but never had done a pen test. But my passion and eagerness to learn is what landed me that job, because this was consulting. This is not an internal role. An internal role, it's not as critical that you hire someone with experience, but with pen testing roles as a consultant, you definitely have to, you need someone that has the skills. The guy that interviewed me saw my potential. I shared with how I did self-learning. At one point, I was doing web design as a side hustle. So I hosted all the websites at home in a web server that I built. And he heard all the stuff that I was self-taught, and he took a chance on me. So hire for passion and not so much tenure, because kind of going back to what you said earlier, and this is a thing I think is a mistake in the industry. I've seen some very talented individuals, and kind of a way to retain talent is you really don't want to go on the tenured method, because you just think of the government employee, not bashing all government employees. Some people try to find that cushy government job. They show up every day for 20 years, they retire, and that's it. It's not something they're passionate about. And, just someone in a seat showing up for work doesn't entitle them to raises. I mean, if they're doing good work, yeah, they deserve a raise. But there's some people that come in, as you kind of mentioned yourself, as a recruiter, in a short period of time. I've seen people in a short period of time because there's just natural talent, people's intelligence, how quickly they pick this stuff up. But the things I see, the people that perform the best are the people that are passionate. They work hard and have a good work ethic. And you can bring some of these people in and they're up to speed in no time. And one of the advantages to bringing in someone new is you take a lot of the people that have been around pen testing for a while. Not everyone has gotten up to speed on cloud pen testing, and people that are kind of break in now are learning cloud. So they know some technologies that some of the older pen testers may not know of. And so just, really take a chance. One of the things I'd like to see people do, and I kind of pitched this to a company that does pen testing as a service a while back, is to offer apprenticeships. The way companies hire internships, but internships are a good way to get a job. But the problem is most companies require you to be going to a college, working on a degree in that field to get the internship. But if companies would have apprenticeships, they could bring someone on for 90 days, maybe even 6 months on a temporary basis, contract to hire. And if they come in and they do good, you hire them. But if they come in and maybe they're just not up to speed quick enough, maybe they're really not what you need, then you rotate that role out. Let someone else come in. And what you're doing is you're allowing someone to get some hands-on experience that'll help them get a job. So maybe they're not a fit in your organization, but 90 days or 6 months worth of experience, they can go somewhere else. But I think really when you're bringing on juniors and mentoring, you really need to make sure that you're spending time coaching them on the job, because some of the mistakes I've seen, I worked for a company and I was hard on. I was used to working remote, but I had two younger colleagues that this was their first time working remote. One of them, after about 6 months, left to go somewhere else because they needed more guidance. They wanted to be in an office. And the other one was never that successful because they just didn't have the guidance. I mean, some people, I'm not encouraging people to micromanage, but when you got some junior people, sometimes they need a little more guidance, and that's wanted. As people become more senior and experienced in their trade, then they don't need that as much. But at first, you need to make sure that they're getting the attention that they're needing, mentoring them. That may not be directly with the manager. That could be some with some of the other seniors. But I think you can really excel. And I think having that sense of team, you really want to build a team. When you're working remote and everyone's totally isolated, there's no communication, they're not going to be as successful. People want to belong to something. There's some people that are more introverted that don't want as much, but I think really you need some sense of a team overall. So people, they feel like they're part of something, and they feel a more loyalty as far as trying to retain employees. If you feel like you're part of something, you're appreciated, people are going to put in more effort than someone that's not treated well and kind of ignored. If you're valued, and another thing as far as retaining employees is make sure you got a career path, that you've got training, and you do that, and people are going to stick around. A lot of times people leave because they're not getting training. There's not a career path. So show them a career path. And some of those things are very inexpensive. And sometimes with the training, you can leverage stuff like Hack the Box. Rob Fuller also goes under the hacker handle Mubix. He's like the red team lead. Believe it, Delta Airlines, not actually United Airlines. And kind of for team building and education purposes, his team will jump on Hack the Box on Fridays, and it's like a CTF type environment. People are just getting on there. They're working through different challenges as a team. There's a little team building there, as well as they're sharpening their skills, because there comes a point you can take a lot of different training. It gets to be where it's difficult to find new training to enhance your skills. And at some point, you just need to do something like Hack the Box and CTF type activities. And those are the type of things that keep employees interested and help retain them.
Yeah, and going to conferences too, that's a big one.
Yeah.
A lot of people like to get to go to DEF CON and stuff like that. That was one of the biggest perks for some of the consulting firms I used to work with. They would send people to conferences, and that was, I'd talk to people and they were like, holy cow, yeah. I mean, every other consulting firm I've worked for, we were so busy being billable that they wouldn't give us a week off, to go to a conference and train and get CPEs and learn more about the industry and network and stuff like that. And that's all very valuable too. There's also the flip side, is they could encounter their next employer. So, retention is obviously very important. You touched on that and how important culture is. I think at some point, though, especially with those high performers, eventually they may leave because there's only so much your organization or your team can do for them. On previous episodes, we've kind of discussed how every employee basically has a shelf life. Nobody's going to stay there forever. So how do you build into your strategy as a hiring manager, as a team, that people may leave? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. One of the things, like I mentioned earlier, is the career path. So even keep in mind some of these, the more senior folks. So like if you're doing pen testing, one of the things that people get annoyed with that gets boring is some of the mundane activities like validating vulnerabilities on a pen test that are like SSL or TLS, encryption related stuff. That kind of gets boring. So maybe try to make sure that some of the more senior roles, they get to do more unique type of testing. Maybe they're testing the Citrix environment or some different cloud environments. Make sure that you're kind of giving them some of the advanced tasks to keep it interesting, because a lot of it's, when it boils down to, is interesting work. But this goes back to where you've got juniors and mid-level people. So you really want to make sure you're bringing them up, keep a steady flow of entry-level and mid-level people coming in that will grow into those positions as they're replaced. And usually the people that are on the low end or midpoint are more likely to stay around, with the exception of, maybe some of the entry level employees. Because one of the things I see that happens a lot, and having a lot of my students and people that I mentored, they go to work somewhere. You start out entry level, say like in Dallas, back when I was teaching at the college, I believe like entry level pen testing roles were paying like, $60K a year. After that person has a year's worth of experience, they go somewhere else and easily pick up another 20K, if not more than that, or hit six figures. They really need to build in some decent, pay bumps in there, and be performance based, not just tenure. If you're performing, you're doing the role. If you're doing the role of a mid level pen tester, then promote them. Put them in those roles. Don't just hold them back, because what happens a lot of cases is people get put in those entry level positions, and 2 to 3% raises is all you're getting. You don't get a big bump. You've got to leave, and people will be crazy not to leave.
Yeah, and statistics bear that out as well. People get far more raises by leaving a position than they do by sticking around with the company on average. So, like you mentioned, there's kind of this age old idea that you only want to hire people with long tenures on their resume. That if you hire somebody with less than a year, or they've shown a pattern of that they're a flight risk. I'm kind of the opinion that if you meet somebody's motivators well enough, you can hang on to anybody for at least a year. I think that's kind of a nice round number, at least a year. And if you're doing that succession planning, like you mentioned, you're going to have people to come up behind those folks that do leave. Ultimately, you can't meet everybody's needs all the time, and there's always somebody out there paying more for sure, or offering a promotion. Most people I talk to, the only way they can get a promotion is to go elsewhere. Within their current company, maybe they just don't have the org structure to support a move into management or whatever it may be. In the consulting world, it's really, really common for senior consultants to leave their firm to go to another firm just to get that manager title, because a lot of these organizations are super top heavy. So, that's certainly something that I've noticed. Um, Obviously, pen testing is a very hands-on field, offensive security in general. Do you have any, I guess, could you weigh in on the certs versus experience versus degrees debate when it comes to
Sure.
offensive?
And I'd say as far as the individual that wants to get these, they're definitely help you get your foot in the door. As far as offensive security roles, your certs are going to help you more than degrees will, because there's really the only degree you can get out there that this and specialize in pen testing is like through the SANS Institute. One of their degrees is the only way to do that, because all these other colleges, universities, they're lucky to offer like one pen testing course. So it's really hard to build those skills up. So certifications are going to help the most. But you don't necessarily have to have those. If you've got the skills, if you're able to do through your training, if you're able to actually conduct a penetration test, then you should be able to answer those questions on interview or performing the technical challenges to get into those roles. So really work on those skills. You can get in without it. But the thing is the having a cert is going to help you get your foot in the door. Otherwise, you're really going to have to rely more on networking, which networking is something I really recommend anyway. Some of the best pen testers I know in the industry have zero certifications, and some of them haven't even taken the course for the certification. They've just done self-study, so you can do it without it, but it's just a matter of getting attention. When you're going the normal route of uploading an application to a system, you may get missed over. And that's another, brings me to the networking piece. I have a good example, because a while back, I was at a local OWASP chapter meeting in Dallas, and the speaker worked at US Bank, one of my former employers. And he said during his talk that US Bank was hiring. If you're interested, talk to him and get your resume to him. So I talked to him. I was working in consulting, and I was traveling pretty much nonstop, and I was kind of tired of the travel. So I connected with him, gave him my resume. Within a week, I had an interview. 2-3 weeks later, I was hired. At the same time, I applied for a role, same role like at Bank of America, and I did the traditional route of going online and applying. And this time I had 5 years, just as far as pen testing goes, 5 years of pen testing experience. And this was just this was dedicated consulting, which, you get a lot more experience in different environments. And so with that, I had the OSCP and the SANS Web App Pen Testing Cert, had all those, and I didn't hear back from them until like a year later. This is going the normal route. So someone is completely new, it can be even more difficult than that. But that's where the networking really comes in. Most of my jobs now, I think I was looking a while back, 8 out of 10 jobs I've had, and one of those was the very first pen testing job, were all referrals. There were only a couple jobs that I had that actually was actively recruited by a recruiter. The rest of those were actually networking. And this is great for being a hiring manager. If you're wanting to find talent, you need to be involved in the community. If you're hiring globally, then being part of the global community through like LinkedIn or Twitter, virtual conferences, in-person conferences, and then also your local meetups. Because if you really want to be able to find talent, if you're part of the community, you're going to know who does, what type of discipline, or if they know people. Because back when I was teaching at college, I routinely got people asking me for resumes of entry-level pen testers, people that are trying to break into the field. So just being part of the community is going to make it a lot easier for you to find people. Otherwise, you're going to be totally dependent on the whole process with recruiters and your internal HR department trying to bring in people. So if you kind of know, it's going to speed that process up.
Yeah, ideally, you would be able to go directly to the source, both as a candidate and as a hiring manager. No middlemen. I say this as an external recruiter who's, by definition, a middleman. But yeah, I mean, really, that's the ideal setup. Meeting people at conferences, you get a sense for their professionalism, their soft skills, how they're going to present to a client if you're in a consulting organization. What role would you say that soft skills play in, on the hiring side as well as on the candidate side if somebody is looking for a job?
On the hiring manager side, I would say with your job descriptions, be really clear on your communications with candidates. As far as an interviewee, someone is pursuing a job, one of the things we've kind of we've kind of ran into with the whole social media and mobile phone thing is people are communicating in acronyms. So I've seen emails like this that people were too used to that I'd seen a company email that there was no punctuation, no proper grammar, using uh, acronyms and stuff. And sometimes they're just not acronyms that you'd use in business. So it's hard to understand. So if you really want to make yourself stick out, if you don't have the speaking skills, I would recommend working on your speaking skills, because even if you're not going to be a consultant or you're not wanting to speak at conferences, there's times you're going to have to present to other teams or present to your manager your ideas. So be able to present and speak in public is good. So Toastmasters is a good resource for that. Just, work on your writing skills. Make sure you're writing clear. Make sure it's something understandable. I mean, look at it and make sure it's something people can understand. Don't use too much technical jargon. Don't use acronyms. Use proper punctuation and grammar. There's all these different plugins you can use, like Grammarly, to check your grammar and stuff. Make sure that you're writing well and then also speaking well, because those communication skills are going to help, because it's going to make whoever's hiring you their job easier, because if you're communicating with other people in the organization and they don't understand you, and the quicker and more information I've found that you put into an email, the less back and forth you have. So make sure you're perfectly clear up front, and anything you can think of that they wouldn't, just add more detail than you may think's needed. And in the long run, it's just going to make it easier. So writing skills, make this carries over to email and that sort of thing. One of the best courses I took when I went back to school in 2001, I went back for my associate's degree. And the best class I took was English composition, because when I was in high school, I really didn't take my writing skills seriously, but that did so much more for me. And it's helped me, go on and write books, do conference talks and all this, and help my communications internally. But that's just something to work on. It's not that difficult. And, there's a lot of tools out there like Grammarly that can help you with your writing. And I think some of the newer versions of Office is starting to, they've improved some of their grammar checking, as well as some of the integrations with AI, like with Copilot and stuff, to help write better. So those are some areas I'd really focus on, as well as speaking. Get used to speaking to people. I know a lot of people can be introverted. I used to be really shy, but one of the things I found is when you kind of step out of that comfort zone, that you're going to get a lot more opportunities. You're out meeting people. You can go to these meetups and conferences, and if you're not interacting with people, it's not going to help your networking. So you may hear someone say, yeah, I'm going to all, 10 conferences a year. I'm going to 1 or 2 meetups per month, but I'm not making any connections to do it. You got to get out and talk to people, get up and introduce yourself. And so that's just kind of a good way to get out of your shell. And it's one of the things I've done. And it's probably been one of the biggest helps in my career, along with the networking, is just getting out there and interacting with people. And when you do that, you just get to develop your people skills more.
Yeah, and as somebody myself who sometimes when I go to networking events, I kind of struggle with getting out there and talking to everybody as much as I can right away. Sometimes that can be intimidating. So on the in-person front, I'd advise people, like, just talk to people in your immediate vicinity as much as you can. It may not be a lot at first. It may just be a couple of words. Introduce yourself. You don't need to give a full elevator pitch, and just kind of see where other people talking takes the conversation, and you can kind of chip in with any experience you might have. I think a lot of folks kind of sometimes have imposter syndrome. They feel like they don't have anything to add, or maybe they don't have as much experience as the other people in the room, so it can be kind of intimidating to say something. But I mean, really, at the end of the day, networking, it's not even just about showing your knowledge. Sometimes it can be as simple as connecting with somebody, building rapport, common interests. The latest networking event I went to, we started talking about what it was like growing up without all the technology that we have today, and that was something that we all bonded over. So even if you think you don't have much in common with somebody, chances are you will have something. And
yeah, and one of the things I like to interject too is don't get discouraged if you don't click and connect with everyone. I mean, because there's some people that I've met and you had a really good connection with, and some people you meet and it's on friendly terms, but you just don't really hit it off with that person. Don't get discouraged. I mean, that's it's just kind of like friends. You've got a group of friends you really hang out with, and there's a reason you have a lot in common and that sort of thing. Maybe you went to school together, but those are some of the things to keep in mind. Don't let that discourage you. Just keep going out there and connecting, because as a whole, you want as many quality connections as you can get. But then there's some some connections you just have deeper connections, because I've got like a circle of friends that if I need to discuss certain things, I can, we can jump on a call, meet up for coffee or something. So keep that in mind. And one of the other soft skills I think people overlook is listening. Make sure you're listening, you pay attention. Someone emails you, and I see this a lot because I've got friends, and actually my wife has witnessed, it goes through this a lot, that she'll have someone come back, email her back asking for this information. It was in the email. So pay attention and listen. Those are two things right there that are super key, that people that are really experienced and have a lot of years in this still miss out on the listening part or paying attention. And those are some things there that's going to give you edge over the others.
Yeah, I've actually had some clients where I would email them some really important things, and sometimes I'll even itemize or put them in bullets and say, this is what I need from you. This is what's going on. Here's what we're going to do next. And they'd only respond to one piece of that email, and I'm like, it only takes you 30 seconds to read the email. Just read the email.
Yeah.
But I think to make it easier on people too, that's one of the things you can do to kind of manage up a little bit, especially as a junior person. If you're working with executives or somebody who's just super busy, has a lot of inbox to get through, try and itemize and put things in bullet points. Mark things high priority if they're high priority. Be careful with that one, but try and make it easy for people to read the information that you're giving them. Put it in such a way where it's direct to the point, but also provides enough detail to where somebody can make an informed decision based on the information that you're putting out there. A lot of that stuff can kind of be developed over time. Some of this stuff is very kind of theoretical in nature, and you won't always necessarily pick these things up right away just talking about it. But that's where I think those apprenticeships really come in. Give the junior folks some hands-on keyboard time, give them some time to actually interact with executives and things like that, and see if they pick it up. Some people will, some people won't. Not everybody is going to be, an A player necessarily. I think when you're looking for, especially junior folks, a lot of these things that you're looking for can be kind of intangible. You may not necessarily have the best resume to go on, and you're looking for more of the intangibles like learning ability, critical thinking ability, and stuff like that. Any advice for evaluating people on those sort of intangible things, especially if you don't have a lot to go on a resume?
Yeah, I'd say some of the things you can go by is like whatever email conversations you had, any kind of communications on the phone. You can kind of gauge some of their communication skills from that. But we're talking about junior people and stuff. Another thing I would advise people to do is to promote within the company, because, like, for instance, I've worked at companies where you had a vulnerability management team, so their role was running Nessus or Qualys vulnerability scans. That was it. Maybe there's a remediation team that take things a step further. As things are remediated, they go back and validate whether the finding has been remediated or not. And so these are opportunities that you can take those people and give them a career path to move over to the penetration testing team, because some cases, someone has been running vulnerability scans for several years really understands that piece. And that's kind of where I was at when I got into pen testing, is open up opportunities that, because you already got a good idea of their work ethic and their interest. And so it's not like hiring someone totally new from the outside. So some cases promoting within, and this kind of plays into the plan too, as you mentioned earlier, about having this plan for when the seniors leave, that you've got a steady flow of new people coming in. And as I mentioned, this is someone that's already worked for the company. You see their work ethic, they know the environment. And that's a big hurdle there alone. An experienced pen tester can come in, but they're still going to have to learn the environment. I mean, every environment's different, so they've got to learn how things are done there, the environment, the processes and procedures. So if you have someone internally, then that's part of part of the learning curve that's going to help out. When they say in a lot of cases it's cheaper to retain an employee than hiring someone new, and that's part of it. That company knowledge and the processes and procedures and environmental information that they know is invaluable, and it takes some people, could be 6 months to a year to really learn the environment.
Yeah, and all the software and the way reports are written, a lot of those intangibles that people rarely quantify and tell people how long it takes to do something. So yeah, I think efficiency, knowing environment, things like that are super important. Any efficiency tips for folks, to stay organized or get more efficient, especially as it relates to hiring, managing a team?
Yeah, I think with that goes is just documenting some things like we mentioned earlier. Keep documented process. Keep a good repository of questions to ask on interviews. That's one of the things at one organization I was part of, that we had a document on interview questions, so that way, in case someone forgot to ask it, they were on that list of questions to ask. So kind of have that process kind of documented out. So if you've got new people on the team, maybe someone has, that was, an entry level pen tester, now they're more experienced, they're starting to interview. So you have some of these questions in place along with the answers, what they, to make that process easier as well. Just, keeping, good documents on the processes and procedures and stuff.
Awesome. So just a couple more questions here for you, Philip. First being, be curious if you've encountered any specific challenges in hiring, recruiting over your years in the various organizations you've worked for. Are there certain traps hiring managers fall into, or recruiters, or any relationship between the parties or among the parties that you've seen be common challenges?
One of the things have been, I would say, with recruiters, and I would say companies that are looking for recruiters, look for recruiters that understand the different roles, because there's cases where, as a professional, we always get messages on LinkedIn from recruiters or emails about a job, and I'm getting, recs for a firewall role, and I haven't done firewall since like 2005. And so just, I think as far as a recruiter goes, understanding the roles, and as far as someone hiring a recruiter, look for recruiters that really understand those roles. They're going to be able to do better job finding people for you. So if you took someone that just worked at some company that was providing general labor, that they could be hiring people for retail sales, manual labor, someone that's just using someone like that with that kind of background, just looking at someone, they've got tech experience, and they, so in a lot of cases, what you're going to do is they're going to give employers too many resumes to go through, not qualified, and they're not going to stick with them. So if you're a recruiter, if you really want to do well, get to know those roles, be part of the community. Because one of the things I do with some of the recruiters I know and respect, if I know I'm looking for a job, the first thing I do is I make an introduction to them and my friend that's looking for a job. And I make a lot of introductions like that, because I know they know what they're doing, and they're going to do the best job helping them, as well as companies looking for employees. I know they do their research and they understand the different areas of cybersecurity, and they're going to do a better job hunting for employees. And so, employers, that's the kind of thing you want to look for. That's going to make your life a lot easier. Build a good rapport with these recruiters, and find some that are involved in the community, because they're going to be able to pull for more people. Because it's just like one of the recruiters I was mentioning, they're part of the local Dallas cybersecurity community. They're at the different conferences and meetups, and they know people. And for as far as an individual that's either looking for talent or looking for a job myself, when you see someone that takes enough time and care to come to these events, and sometimes it's after business hours, so they could be home with their family or friends or whatever, doing whatever in their free time, but they're taking the effort to make these connections with people and learn about the roles.
Absolutely. Yeah. Industry specialization is so huge as a recruiter. I'm kind of the opinion that I think on a long enough timeline, if you're a good recruiter, you can recruit for anything. You just
Yes.
have to be able to understand the roles, and there's no real substitute for time in seat when it comes to learning an industry, learning the intangibles. I think if somebody is, say, they're at a corporation, not a consulting firm. At a consulting firm, I think sometimes your recruiters tend to be a little bit more honed to your business, and they're used to hiring the same skill sets all the time. But if you're working for a large corporation, your internal talent acquisition team, they may work on everything from accounting to marketing to IT to security. In which case, it can be difficult to find that person on your recruiting team that actually understands security. So it may take a little bit more hand holding. You may need to spend a little bit of time developing that recruiter and informing them what intangibles you're looking for, what to look for that's not on the job description, not just the basic keywords, but what companies they may have worked for, stuff like that. So if you invest a little bit of time in I would focus on one or two recruiters to focus on your security roles. Try not to farm it out to a whole team of generalists. is kind of a best practice. Develop one person that's going to understand security and can be your go-to. You'll have more success probably that way than trying to work with just, whomever within your organization. And if you can work with an external recruiter, obviously try and find the people that are experts in your given field, like security, as you mentioned. So yeah, that's great. Just one last question here for you, Phillip. Is there anything that we're not talking about in the industry, but we should be, especially as it relates to hiring and recruiting?
I think the biggest thing is just the retention and talent acquisition. I think a lot of times people really don't think about that until it's time. Work on things to retain those employees. Try to bring people up internally, because there you're providing a career path. And some of the organizations I've been at, I've been impressed that they took people that worked in different roles and moved them into the penetration testing team. Because there's some cases you go to work with some companies, I've seen some that you're really good at this role, they really don't want you to move. And then what happens? Those people end up leaving. So you got to provide that career path, make things interesting for them. And as far as, managing people, be a good manager, because, they say people leave companies over managers, and not really so much, the company. They leave it on account of managers. So just be understanding and work with the people, try to understand them and keep the best, your best interest for them. And some of the best managers I've had have shielded us from politics. And in one instance, after those managers were gone from the company, some of the people that are still in that group, all of a sudden they're finding out all the ugly truths about stuff they've been protected from those politics. So if you can protect people from the politics and that drama, it's a lot easier for them to do their job, but they're happy. And so those are some of the things I see. And just, career path and recruiting, as we mentioned earlier, some of the points: being connected to the community, have good recruiters, and even some cases, maybe you could even get with some of the recruiters and ask them to talk to your internal recruiters to help them. And I think, for instance, this is where someone like yourself, if you work with internal recruiters and kind of help them out, I think if they ever need external recruiters, they're going to come to you. If you kind of become their point of reference, their person go to figure out how to hire for these roles, or, understand it better, I think they would come to someone like yourself.
Yeah, and I try and do that as much as I can. It is difficult to develop a deep specialty in a million different areas. I mean, you just can't. You can only hold so much information in your head at once. And if you're an expert at recruiting and marketing, chances are you can also be an expert recruiting and security. So sometimes it does help to have a partner on the outside that really knows it well and can, work with you to help educate you. So those are great points, Phillip. We'll appreciate your time here, and thanks for being on the Talent Gap Fireside Chat. And if anybody wants to get a hold of you or view your podcast, how would they reach out to you?
Sure. The podcast is The Phillip Wiley Show, and you can find Phillip Wiley Show on all the major podcast platforms. The video version is on Spotify and YouTube, and then Apple and all the other popular podcast platforms, even iHeartMedia on there, so they can find that. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, is one of the best places. I'm always open to answer questions, and I do a lot of mentoring still.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Phillip, and thanks everybody else. We'll talk to you later.